In LEC history, we have rarely seen a rookie stand out significantly, mainly due to the league system making it difficult to introduce a newcomer who can bring something different to a team. For this reason, rookies usually join established team one at a time. Yike in G2 has been an incredible addition, but he already had experienced teammates. Isma in SK this past season was excellent jungler. Pythio, Adam or Labrov also brought something different in their debuts, but undoubtedly the gem of the rookies has been Elyoya. I've mentioned this so many times, but essentially Javier went from playing in the Spanish amateur scene to winning 2 LEC splits in just 1 year. We all agree that his feat is incredible, but on the other hand, it is true that his team was quite experienced. This doesn't take away any merit from him, but it shows that, despite having rookies in LEC with good results, until now, rarely had a team with 4 rookies emerge to challenge the entire league, finishing second in their debut split. And this was a bombshell. The whole LEC saw how that the paradise they had built was crumbling. They were nowhere where they could relax and make good money without exerting too much effort. Ultimately, if no one rebels and tries to beat those unreachable rivals, there is no need to practice too much. If I'm going to lose against China and Korea, why bother trying? The same thing happened a bit with G2. If they have caps, it's normal for them to win. But then we all saw how G2 magically had the best top laner, jungle, ADC and support in the league, without getting into the debate of whether this pro team is right or wrong. Magically, the team who trains the most has the best players, so it turns out that an entire team, not individual players, has come to try to break these promises. MadLionSky aimed to show the entire league that with training, discipline and a hunger to conquer the world, you can beat T1, JDG, Gen.G and whoever you put in front of you. Some said it was presumptuous, audacious and sometimes even delusional, when Supa said he was the best ADC in the world, or when Melfed said he could win worlds. Personally, I think the mental is right. I believe I'm the best content creator in the whole world. I think I could make the best video in the world without a mouth or hands. And I personally think that MadLionSky, myself, and many others have experienced the same thing, that we didn't really fully believe it. Let's look at the differences. Faker is the best player in the history of League of Legends. Many consider him the best in any competitive discipline in terms of relative success. That is, he has contributed and won more compared to the life of the competition, partly because of the short life of esports. Taking Faker as an example, let's see what sets him apart from the rest. Things like going to the gym every day focusing on being the best possible shape. Does Faker need strength? No, then he won't do a strength training in the gym. His training will focus on mobility, agility, stretching and getting his body functioning to improve in League. Does Faker need drama? No, then he won't have any. He won't make gestures, disrespecting opponents even if they ask him to. He won't have a bad word, he won't even use skins or just have a girlfriend. Lee Sang-hyuk focuses 100% of his life on being the best player in the world, and this is reflected in his life, body, mind, game, networks and videos. Personally, I believe that MadLionSky hasn't fully believed in this 100%, and I believe that with such a high goals as they had, not achieving them has a very harsh impact. For rookies has been enough to reach an LEC final, but perhaps not being consistent with their achievement has demotivated them. Failing the first objective is usually quite tough, especially considering that they were very close and diverged from the prediction of others. It is impressive to reach an LEC final against G2 as the most entertaining team in the league with 4 rookies and almost win LEC, but almost isn't winning. Second place isn't winning. For Matt, finishing second is a failure. The bottom top lane phases have been among the best on several occasions, and in Merwin's case, it is true that sometimes they have been quite bad. The player tends to be aggressive, and that's heavily punished. On the other hand, it is the first time I have ever seen Elyoya attempt something in the first pathing in practically every game. It reminds me a lot of that world's meta where he could play Qiyana, Wukong and Kha'Zix, and we could see that he excels in this aspect. And what about the mid lane? The Polish soldier can withstand anything thrown at him. He's been the best of MadLionSky when it comes to consistency, and with all these good things, it just doesn't work. Let's analyze what I have said. Top and bot lane phases. jungle early invades, and mid lane holding the early game. Do you notice a common factor in these three actions, right? Yes, indeed, Mad Lions Koi has one of the best early games in the entire LEC. It is undeniable, no one can tell you otherwise. Some matches have even been compared to the Chinese League of Legends hyper tempo, where every Mad Lions player goes all out and fights everything. With the advantage of mechanics against their opponents, they win these early game fights. It is very simple. If a 50-50 is executed better than your opponents, you win it. If you have a better players than the opponent, the chances of it going well are higher. That's why the only team that has been able to beat Koi outside VO1 is G2, where the players are better than those of Mad Lions. All of this is very simple. So, why doesn't it work anymore? Here's what surprises me personally. It's not that it doesn't work. Mattis is still a very good team in early game, and many of those aggressive ideas still work. It just seems like they've forgotten how to play the game. Because what's happening with Mad Lions Koi, starting from that sort of desmotivation we've talked about you and me at the beginning of the video, Mad Lions Koi suffers from not knowing how to play the mid game. Let's go to the most basic theory in League of Legends: windows and resources. The windows in early game are very clear. Have you shoved the wave into the enemy tower? You can rotate to the jungle to accompany Aljoya on an invade. If the bot lane or mid lane, with your wave under their tower, decide to rotate, they will lose experience and gold indisputably. At the same time, if they don't rotate to defend their own jungle, Aljoya can steal it, and the result will be the same, a loss of gold and experience on the enemy buff. This window is one of the easiest in all League of Legends, but it's a very clear example to see that a window is nothing more than a time frame where you can execute an action. We understand that to prepare for a neutral objective, both teams will create a window one way or another, meaning they will push waves, leave them in reset, or simply opt to lose them to gain time for fight for a dragon, a tower, Baron, or ever just Vision. And to fight for this neutral objective, each team has resources, which are simply a list of items that each team possesses and that allow them to win fights. These resources are more or less important depending on the game, champions, moments, and also the objective. If you want to fight for Vision in the enemy jungle to then contest the dragon, the resources to consider are Vision, Engage, and Disengage. If the opponent team doesn't have a ping words, congratulations, the Vision is yours, as their threat check options are very limited. Most of the time, they won't have more than 4 words, and your team can wait into a bush to set up an ambush or simply know the enemy's position to act accordingly. If the resources we are looking at are for fighting a basic dragon without having much vision or anything like that, we should focus on more general things. Malphite's ultimate, Orianna's shockwave, or flashes on the carries are what we call key resources. They are the resources without which we can generate pressure with our champions. If Gnar doesn't have flash or Rakan doesn't have ignite, those are things to consider, of course, but the resources aren't the most important for these champions. If I know that the enemy Malphite doesn't have ultimate, I won't be afraid to expose my ADC to him. With all this clear, let's go to the Koi's problem. Remember, above all, windows are resources. Koi, like any lazy team, knows that before fighting for a neutral objective, you should try to exhaust the opponent's resources, make the enemy ADC waste flash, make to the top laner use TP, and that kind of. This is usually achieved by skirmishes across the map, fights with little value whose objective is to exhaust opponent resources. These fights happen like this. First, we must analyze the opponent's key resources. Second, we must understand with which list of non-key resources we can exhaust those key resources of the opponent. And third, we must find a window to do so. If we have Malphite on the team, we can rotate mid, use an ultimate on the enemy Jinx 3 minutes before an objective, and force Hes into one of two things. Either she uses flash, making the objective very difficult for the opponents to fight, or she dies, leaving us with extra ward, probably a tower and Jinx behind in experience levels, meaning she also won't be able to fight for a neutral objective. And our Malphite will have ultimate again. Koi's problem with this formula is that they don't measure well. Our Malphite rotates out of tempo, uses flash, ultimate, Zeri's flash, and ghost for Jinx flash, or this rotation simply doesn't happen, and Jinx ends up being more useful than Zeri in the neutral fight. In other words, Mad Lions Koi can find these windows, and if they do, they spend too many resources trying to make them work. I couldn't note what the origin of the failure is. I suppose this is because they trust too much sometimes and too little on the other times. Consider that if I couldn't explain the theory, these 5 players know it by heart. Although, of course, applying it is much more complex than simple theory. Several questions need to be answered before making any play. Where's the enemy jungler and mine? Who is in fog of war and who isn't? Why is this play good or bad? Will the opponent realize it or they will not? It is predictable or not? And so on to infinity. These are just questions I can ask myself in solo queue. So imagine the magnitude of questions they ask themselves. And of course, this play with Malphite and Jinx is much more complex. Simply because if a Malphite disappears from the top lane, Jinx won't push the mid lane in her life. For this reason, more complex plays are made, with hiding things, sometimes sacrificing resources to cover your intentions, and a very long etc. But let's take something good out of it. I will tell you that this, the mid game, is what can be trained the best. The difference on mid game, depending on the training, are quite clear. However, training lane phases or mechanics doesn't yield results as easily. Furthermore, it is both good and a bad thing. The mid game is what decides the most games. All teams constantly trying to improve it, but the laning phase helps a lot. Consider that my ADC has half an item more than the opponent's. The pressure in mid will generally be mine, which will create windows to gain more and more advantage. And this point comes with Elyoya. The team captain is going through the worst moment of his individual career. I've never been Javier coin flip so many fights, and this has been the trigger for Mad Lion's bad mid games performance, and I know it's much more extensive, that super positioning and aggressiveness playing an important role, that Alvaro on a bad day is one of the worst supports in the league, and that Mewing disconnect at times. But the main work, where the change of Matt should resolve, it is on the Discord that Melzet and Elyoya must have. It is too much for him to be the captain? Perhaps so, it is not bad, but then the team should play differently. If that's not a problem, playing by the book, Mad Lions should beat all teams except G2. Your players are better. They probably have more gold than the opponents, which means that in 5v5 fights, you should come out on top. What can I say? I'll be keeping an eye on CoinFuture games and analyzing whether they meet these conditions or not. You know that in this channel, we always test the Spanish players, and as I always say, you can follow me on Twitter to see my more mundane thought about League of Legends. You can comment on what you think of Mad Lions coin level this past split, and without further ado, I bid you farewell. Goodbye.